Okay, so here we are in section 9.5. Okay, it says additional information and full hypothesis test. So now this is the section where we're going to put all of the previous sections, 9.1 to 9.4, all together to do a hypothesis test from start to finish. Now in chapter 9, there's going to be three different types of hypothesis tests that we could do. The one would be the first scenario, which is where we've got one population mean and the population standard deviation is known. We'll be doing a normal distribution when we're doing that kind of hypothesis test. Another scenario is if we have one population mean, but where the population standard deviation is unknown, then we're going to use a student's t distribution with that hypothesis test. And then lastly, the third scenario is that if we have one population proportion, we'll go back to using a normal distribution again. Okay. Here on this first page, I've kind of condensed all 5 steps for doing a hypothesis test. Right here, step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I tried to compress it down as small as I could. Here's another copy of the hypothesis test conclusion table. And at the beginning of chapter 9, I showed this graphic organizer or this flowchart. And you may have looked at this before and thought, what the heck is all this stuff? But let's take a quick look at it again, now having covered all the other sections. So, you're going to be reading a word problem, and the word problem is going to give you some information about the sample. It's going to give you some information about the population. It's going to make some kind of claim, an original claim. And that original claim, is either going to be the null or the alternate. It's also going to give you some information about the confidence level or the significance level. And kind of from these things, you're going to put these together and kind of derive what type of test are we doing. And what I mean by what type of test, it's which of these 3 scenarios. That is the type of test we're talking about. And so you can see that here with the population things that we know about the population, if we knew the population standard deviation, then we know we'd be using a normal distribution. If the population standard deviation was unknown, then we know we'd be using a student's t distribution. And that'll tell us what type of test and what kind of distribution to use. So you see how knowing something about the population kind of leads us down this path. Okay. So, the distribution that you use could be normal, student's t, chi-squared of Fisher's f. And remember that the distribution could be left-tailed, right-tailed, or two-tailed. And what tells us whether it's left, right, or two-tailed is the alternate hypothesis. So from the original claim, you calculate the null and the alternate, and then the alternate tells you whether you do left, right, or two-tailed. Over here, kind of on the left-hand side, so if you want to compare areas, you will calculate a p-value from your test statistic, and you can compare apples to apples here and oranges to oranges here by comparing a test statistic to the critical value. And either comparing area or critical values and test statistics, that will tell you whether to reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. And then at the very end, when you write your conclusion, you're going to factor in whether you were rejecting or failing to reject the null hypothesis, and then what your original claim was. Was your original claim the null, or was it the alternate? And you use the conclusion table here. So hopefully maybe now you can see, or you remember, that initially you didn't kind of know about some of these other things and how they all kind of fit together in this flowchart, but now we've covered each of these parts individually. But now we're going to put all those individual parts together to come to a conclusion and use this conclusion table. And, if you don't like, a flow chart to help you kind of organize your thoughts and make a picture of what you're doing, again, I've kind of put this out literally, organized top to bottom with each of these different steps, kind of explaining what you're doing in each of these steps. Okay. So let's end it there. In the next video, we'll actually go through and do an example.